In this video, I'm going to talk about the different steps and the whys in for the denture fabrication on both the mannequin and with the live patient. They're pretty similar, so I'm going to kind of lump them together. So if I forget something, please forgive me. Initially, we practiced on a mannequin, and it was really hard getting the impression of the mannequin. I don't know if it's usually harder, but it took me like 50 tries to get it with the PVS and with the alginate. And so that definitely showed me that you have to use precision for both the cost purposes, but also for the comfort of your patient. Nobody wants to get 1,000 impressions taken on them, especially when they all come out like garbage. So props go to Ross and Hermie for letting 28 brand new dental students work on them. But anyhow, um, the description of this part of our prosfolia asks for pictures. I won't do it in the video, but I'll do it on the side on the PowerPoint. So initially, what we did was we took an alginate impression using just a stock tray of both the maxillary and mandibular arch. That was pretty challenging, and between the between my group, it took a couple tries. For my group, the mandible was quite a bit harder than the maxilla. I think it was because his ridge was so small, we kept thinking that we didn't get the vestibule, but there really just wasn't much to get. I, for one, had to take it twice. During this same time, we marked the PPS, the posterior palatal seal, so that we could know how far we needed to cut the custom tray for later. But to do that, we just dabbed across the vibration line when our patient opened his mouth with ink, and then it left the mark on the alginate, so we had it that way. So that was the first appointment with the patient. The next one was the next thing we did was we poured up those alginate models in stone so that we could create a custom rim, a custom tray. And we did that just in the lab with stone, and then afterward we cured triad over it to make the custom tray, of course, so that it was custom to their arches. After that, we had another appointment with them, with our patients, and at this one we used the more expensive PVS, and that is quite a bit more sensitive than alginate. It takes, I can't remember the measurements, but the spaces that it captures is a lot more exact than the alginate. So it's supposed to allow for a closer seal and a better fit, but that's just not always the case. So we did that again in teams. Some people took the maxilla, some people took the mandible, and we did the heavy body first, and then we did the light body to make sure we captured everything, and it was just very smooth, a very clear impression of the max and mandible. So after that, if I'm thinking correct, we took those PVS impressions, and then of course our patients left, and we went back to the lab and we re-poured those ones up again to make a model, and we again put triad over it as we did triad because that would essentially just be our makeshift denture that they could stick in and we could put the teeth in. And then on top of that triad, we built our wax rim for both the maxilla and mandible. I think at this time we had it mounted on the face bow, but it's pretty arbitrary, so never mind, I take that back. We didn't have it on the face bow. We just built the wax on top of it and just did like general measurements of how tall and how wide they should be in different parts. Of which is different from maxilla and mandible, and then anterior and posterior, it's also different of how thick the wax should be. And then at the third appointment, they came back and they put in the triad with the wax on top of it, just blobs of wax that went across. And at this time in teams again, everybody was responsible for one of the Dress to the Nine principles. And though one person was responsible, we all shared to make sure that it was done right, since we were all sharing the one patient. Mine was the zenith line, which is where the teeth meet the gingiva. Essentially, it's just that line that you create so that the patient doesn't have too much of a gummy smile. And doing that part in real life was so much more meaningful than it was on the models, because you could put things in, make things relative to their actual face, not just different lines on the post. So real life, the Dress to the Nines put everything into better perspective when you actually had the patient. Even though with a mannequin we tried to like use our neighbor as the model, it still didn't quite click for me until we were actually with Ross and Hermie. Furthermore, after they left, we took our measurements that we had etched into the wax, and we mounted. That's the point that we like built up the cast that we had, and then we mounted it on the face both so that we could get a better idea for occlusion, and so that we could insert the teeth and make sure that they actually fit. So that's what we did. I'll put pictures of that in the side. Once we got it in the face bow properly, I personally started with the maxilla at the midline, at the marked midline, and worked on the patient's left side first and worked my way back, then did the other side, and then did the mandible. All the while constantly checking to make sure that it was flush with the occlusal plane, and so that flush with the occlusal plane, which I tested with on my table, not necessarily always my face bow, using the mandible measurements that I'd taken. But yeah, so I put in all the teeth, and then eventually I checked the occlusion between both the maxilla and the mandible. It seemed to work pretty good. There were some adjustments that I had to make. For instance, there was just no way that another molar was going to fit on one of his mandibular sides. I can't remember which side, so I just left that out because there was just no room. But then come to find out, on his actual dentures that you made for him, Dr. Durham, one of his sides it just never has like the second molar, so that was good. That gave me a good indication that I was on the right track. So after my teeth were in and everybody else's teeth were in, I checked occlusion, blah blah blah, and then on what I believe was the fourth appointment with Ross and Hermie, they came back in, and he took turns trying everybody's denture, an ideal set and a non-ideal set, and I was extremely proud because my ideal set, I think, came in first or second place of all of them. Ross, I think, marked them as first or second place. Then when Hermie compared and looked at them, she also put it in the not ugly pile, which was very flattering. It was so fun to watch. And it was really cool to see the non-ideal ones, or even the ideal ones, that still looked terrible and were done without care. And like, did they follow Dress to the Nines? I don't think so, because they looked so bad and were at total disarray. So that was pretty cool, and it really helped me see how following Dress to the Nines can lead you to a great denture, and how any sort of carelessness, or if you get stuck on anything, you really do need to fix and make sure it's proper. And as crappy as it is to come back so many times for